We've worked with browser.sandbox, browser.element, and browser.document, but there's one more function that makes working with single page apps really, really easy in Elm, and that's browser.application. So we're going to take the app that we left off with in the last video, and we're going to simplify it quite a bit and get some of the nice client-side navigation features that you can expect from any single page application framework. So let's take a look. This is where we left off, right? We have a single main module. It imports multiple pages, and our model for our app holds on to the current page that we're on. We're either on the dashboard, or we're on the counter, or we're on a not found page. And we pass in a URL from flags, and that determines which page we should initialize and show to the user. If we can't parse the URL, if we can't make sense of it, we just put people on a not found page. We saw how the update function allows us to route messages to the update functions for each individual page. And then we just use command.map, and we kind of use this record updater with these dashboard model or the counter model custom type variants, and that allowed us to kind of combine things together. And then subscriptions and views worked in a similar way. Depending on what page we're on, we're going to show a certain view. Depending on what page we're on, we're going to show a certain subscription. And we wired that all together using browser.document. There is another thing that we can use called browser.application, which makes it so we don't need to pass in those URLs from JavaScript, and that's what we're doing over here. We're passing in the href, but more importantly, with browser.application, we get access to URL change events, and we get access to like when people click on a link, we can handle that with our own custom Elm code. And that's going to allow us to have client-side navigation. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to add these two new message types that we're going to be able to have access to. And let's take a look at what happens here. So I'm saving this, and we're getting some errors saying it doesn't know what URL changed and URL requested is. And that's fair because we haven't added them to our program. So I'm actually going to change the order of these because I think it's going to make more sense to talk about. A URL request happens when a user clicks an A tag with an href. So on our counter page, we have an A tag that links back to slash, takes us back to the dashboard, right? I don't know if I can, I can't close that, but that's okay. And we also have on the dashboard a link that takes us back to the counter. So every time we click on that, Elm is going to send us a message at URL requested, and it is going to send us a browser.url request. We can use that URL request to determine if we actually want to navigate. And when we do that, Elm will call the URL changed after it updates the actual URL that you see here in the top of the browser. So these are the two messages that we're going to want to handle no matter what page we're on. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if I get a URL requested for a request, I'm going to use underscore to say I don't care what page we're on. We're going to do something over here. So I'm going to do a to-do, or we can use our friend debug.todo URL requested. And we don't have to do that here. But we're going to do the exact same thing. This, and we're just going to add a debug.todo. What we can have for now actually is we're just going to return things with no changes. I don't want the program to crash right now. I want to be able to see what happens. So I did that, but we're still getting some errors in the bottom, and that is because the signature of init has changed. Now init has access to a URL and something called a browser navigation key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and we're going to upgrade the init function up here so that it has access to that additional information. And I'm going to import this browser navigation module, and I'm going to expose the key type so that we don't need to have that huge prefix in front of it. Browser.navigation exposing key. And I'm just going to give this the alias nav so that we can use that a little bit later when we want to do some navigation stuff. Cool. All right, so flags, URL, key. We have access to that. what's really cool is now we have access to a URL, so we don't need to read that off the flags. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say flags doesn't need the URL property anymore. I'm not going to pass it in anymore from JavaScript. We're just going to pass in that initial count that the counter page is using. And we can get rid of this entire case expression. So there's no more possibility that JavaScript didn't send us URL. Now we're guaranteed to get one from Elm every time. So here, we're still going to use route.fromURL to determine what page we're on, but we're going to be guaranteed to have a nice URL that's going to have a path that's going to allow us to determine which route we should render for the user. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we're going to store this key on our model, because we're going to use this when we get requests later on. So I'm just going to say in all of these branches, let's store that browser navigation key on the model. It's going to come in handy, I promise. So that is the key. What we can also do is we can store the current URL. So I'm going to store that too. So there's going to be a bit of duplication here. We could break this out into a function. If we'd like to get rid of some of the duplication, I'm going to leave it like this for now because it's not too much, and I think it's clear to read for the time being. But if I start doing more and more logic, I think it's going to be time to take this and add some parameters for, like, what init function to call, what constructors, that kind of thing. So we'll probably do that very soon in the future. But what we have now is we've got a model, we've got a URL, we got a key, we got a page, and when I refresh, what you should see is when I click, all my links are broken, right? So that's kind of weird. Let's go to the Vite config and see what's going on. I'm going to put debug mode back on, and that's going to give me access to this debugger. And what you'll notice is clicking one of these links. Let's take a look. We've got this A link here that hrefs over to the home page, and our URL is a counter. When I click this number's going up, but we're not actually navigating. So what's happening is we are getting that URL request that we talked about earlier when we added the URL requested handler, and it is giving us the new URL, and it's saying, hey, the user is trying to navigate to this path. And what are we doing in response to that? Well, we're doing nothing. We are ignoring that request. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, in the case where the request is browser.internal and we have access to a URL, let's navigate to that URL. nav.pushURL. And then what push URL is going to take, you kind of got a little preview of it there, is it's going to take that key that we stored in the model. That's important for using this programmatic navigation feature. And we're going to give it the URL as a string. And it's going to create a command. So what we want to do is when we do get a URL request, we're going to push that URL. We're going to get the key off the model. That's why we stored the key in the model, like you see here. And what we're going to do is we are going to use the URL.toString function to turn that URL into a string and push that new URL onto the browser history, and that will call URL changed for us. So I'm going to do that. There's also the notion of an external link, like if you wanted to add like Google or something, this would be like another URL. And in that case, we don't want to push on a browser history. What we want to do is we just want to load whatever that external URL was. So that might be, google.com or, github.com/your repo or whatever. So external links are things that are outside of our app, and internal links are actual URLs that would navigate to a page inside of our single page application. So I'm going to save this, and our app is still not going to work. So let's take a look at why. So I'm going to click to dashboard. I want you to look at this, and I also want you to take a look at the URL bar at the top. So I click this, it changes the URL, but it didn't change the page that I'm on. What ended up happening was after we used nav.pushURL, it did change the URL, which is great. So we got the URL changed message. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit here. And now we have a new URL in the browser. And if we refresh, it'll show us the dashboard. But we didn't actually load the new page content here. So we still got this commented out to do where we're not doing any work. We're not doing anything interesting. So what I want to do is I want to take this same logic that we had which is, let's take a page and we're going to take that URL, and based on the URL, we're going to call the initialization function for that page. The thing that's going to be different is we don't want to redefine this each time. So what I think we should do is we should move this into a little helper function. This helper function is going to be set URL and initialize page. And what it's going to do is take in a URL, it's going to take in a model, and it's going to return the new model in command message. So this is going to be a function that we're just going to define. This isn't a special function that Elm needs. This is just a function that's going to help us out so we can reuse some code in init and also on navigation. So I'm going to do this URL model. And what we want to do here is say when the app starts up, we're going to call this. We're going to pass it that URL, and we're going to pass an initial version of the model here. So I'm going to kind of just copy this not found. We're going to use that as the default. And so when the model comes in, rather than setting the key again, what we're going to do is we're going to say, take the model as is and just set the URL and set that page. So I think that'll be nice. What we can also do is just have the caller be responsible for setting the URL too. So here the URL is already set, so we don't need to worry about modifying the URL. So we're going to say initialize page instead of set URL and initialize page. So this is going to take a look at that URL, and based on the route that it can decode from the URL, it is going to just modify our page, set the new page value based on the result of running init on that page. So init shouldn't have changed how it works, but if we copy this over here, we're going to want to use something really similar right here. So what we want to do is we want to say, this is going to take in the model as is, and we don't need to change the page that we're on here anymore. We just want to give it the model with that URL modified, and then when we call initialize page, it's going to return the model in the command that we expect. So we can really do this on one line if we want. But the idea, oh, and we also need access to flags, right? So if every page needs access to flags, what I recommend is that we just store those flags in the model. So the flags that JavaScript sent are always going to be available through model.flags. And similarly, that's right. Oh, we need to update the model to say that it will hold on to those flags. All right, that was a lot. Let's see if our app works. So I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to click to counter, and it takes me to the counter page. And notice we got rid of that white flash, right? As I do this, it's just swapping out the elements that are rendered inside of my Elm application. So it's only changing the things that need to change. And as I switch from the dashboard to the counter, back and forth, I'm getting URL request messages. And this is how Browser.application works. So I can rewind time, and you can see this is all the stuff that I did as I clicked around through those links. And it's just alternating between requesting URLs. We approve every URL that we're requesting, and we always call nav.pushURL. So then that's quickly followed by a URL changed event to let us know that the actual browser URL changed, and we're safe to fetch the data for that new page. And that's pretty much it. That's Browser application. So everything is running off of Elm URL. We don't need to pass in any special URL information when we start up the app. And when we refresh, everything works. I go to the counter, I refresh, everything works as expected. So that's Browser.application. In the next video, we're going to take a look at sharing data between pages by adding something called context. That's really helpful for single page apps. And then that's kind of it for Elm. You will have learned everything, at least for the beginner course. But I'm excited for you, and I'll see you in the next video.